Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the El Calvario podcast. I'm sure right away you noticed that we have some new equipment here. And also we have a special guest who I'll introduce in just a moment
old
here.
Equipment and new equipment.
Yes. So we're joined here today with Pastor David Cantillo, who is here this weekend for Explosión at El Calvario. Pastor, how are you?
I am good, my brother. I am a little tired from the flight, but excited to be here in Chicago again. I've been here many times. So.
Mm-hmm. I know we literally got you right after you got out of your flight. So I'm sure you're probably just still a little tired.
No, I'm good. Thank the Lord.
Yes. So before we get started, I just want to encourage everyone to continue to watch, follow, subscribe this podcast and all that stuff. And Pastor, I know you've been here multiple times for previous explosions that we've held here. Right. Do you have a favorite memory or a moment?
Yeah. I think the favorite memory is probably the first time.
Okay.
And I started my ministry with in the English church. In fact, my Spanish was kind of a little rough back then. And then I met this skinny little Colombian guy at a conference named Suarez. And he got a hold of me, and he insisted that I come preach at his church in Chicago. And I had never preached at a Spanish church at that point. And so I said, well, okay, I'll go. And so I came to, I don't remember exactly where they were meeting at the time, where the church was meeting, but it was just very special. Mm-hmm. And even though I struggled with Spanish a little bit, I felt such a confirmation and such a joy to be preaching, to Spanish people, Hispanics. So that was special. And in fact, that kind of changed my direction in that I went into Spanish ministry more after that. Mm-hmm. So that first one was really, really special. Also, I got to sleep in either Andrew or Tony's bed. And because, at that point they didn't, couldn't get a hotel. So I slept in their house, and the bed was too short. So my feet stuck out at the end. So that was another special memory.
Yeah.
Yeah. So way back. I don't know how many years. I don't even want to think.
I don't think I was born yet.
No, probably not.
I don't think so. And it's funny, you mentioned that I didn't even know that you started out as English.
Yeah.
I've known you my whole life just as someone that speaks Spanish and speaks Spanish well.
Yeah.
I would have never thought that you struggled early on with that.
Yeah, I started in back then singles ministry was starting. And so I started preaching in singles conferences, throughout the U.S. in different places. And then the very first Spanish church that I preached was here in El Calvario. So
wow. Full circle.
Yeah.
And so we're going to talk a little bit more with Pastor Cantillo here in just a moment, just talking a little bit more about his testimony. But I did have just another question, and I'm sure you can answer after you have some water there. Is just whenever you go out to preach, what kind of preparations do you kind of do or make, I guess, whenever you have to go out and preach at another church?
Well, it's more, it's rarely that I get a completely brand new message. Mm-hmm. It happens, but most of the time I bring something that God has already revealed to me and that I have some knowledge of. And it's a matter of putting it together and praying and seeing what of the things that the Lord has given me is the direction that I feel for that conference. Yeah. Every now and then the Lord will just give you a new message, a new direction. But many times it is kind of giving what you already have received from the Lord and being able to share that.
Yeah, that's cool.
So, yeah.
I was always just curious as to how what people do, I guess, in preparing to go somewhere else. Sure.
Yeah, and even now, I mean, I pretty much think I know what I'm going to preach tonight, but this afternoon I will pray again and confirm, and the Lord may just give me something else. And but typically that's what you do. You bring and sometimes you combine things, ideas or concepts or revelations that God has given you. But that's the preparation is, for a few weeks. You kind of take it and pray about it and study
and I'm sure we're expecting great things this weekend here at El Calvario.
Amen.
And so I'm sure it'll be great. But
in Jesus' name.
Yes. But let's talk a little bit more about your testimony, right? Let's go back just a few years, if you want to say, right?
Right.
Did you grow up in a church, or how exactly did your ministry, your walk with God start?
Well, my parents were pastors all their lives. And so I grew up in a pastor's home. And I decided I would not be a pastor. I didn't like the job. I was a Christian. I believed in God and everything, but I saw many things from the pastoral family perspective that were very difficult about being a pastor, and the sacrifice, the work, the little money, all those things. And so I decided that no, I didn't want to do that. So that was my beginning approach to the ministry. It was a firm no.
Yeah. And I know it's funny. I guess maybe it's just because my father is a musician.
Yeah.
And growing up, I also just had no interest in music.
Yeah.
I really didn't listen to it. And every few years, he tried to say, like, oh, let's teach you this instrument. I'd say no. Yeah. And then, no, let's try to teach this other. No, tampoco. Yeah. And then here I am now as the music leader here. Right. Right?
Yeah.
It's interesting how God works.
Yeah. Yeah. And God has a purpose in all that. Yeah.
So then what changed, I guess, in you to kind of start looking into that direction?
Yeah. Well, my family was in Miami, Florida. And from there, I moved to Michigan to go to college. And I started going to an English church and got involved in just being helpful, serving in whatever manner I could. Music, I played guitar because there wasn't a lot of help. And then I taught Bible studies, just doing the things that a Christian ought to do. So that's how it began. Moved from there to another church in Ohio. And there I helped with, mowing the lawn and cleaning the church, from which the pastor's wife fired me because I guess I'm not a good cleaner. And I was kind of happy about that one. And then got involved in music again, got involved with the young people, and then just felt a calling from God to serve Him. And I had actually felt that calling before and kind of waited, put it off, and then it came again. And so that time I made that commitment to serve the Lord, not knowing what it meant, just to kind of take the title of minister, which is a big step, and began to preach and, share the word and things like that.
Do you remember your first sermon, I guess?
Yeah, my first sermon was actually in the church that I was in Michigan, and it was on a weeknight. So I prepared it, had 4 or 5 pages of notes, and got up and went through my notes in about 5 minutes and sat down, and and then the pastor took my scripture and preached for about another 30 minutes. So yeah, it was quite a humbling experience. Yeah.
So then what that desire to serve or to do more, what happened after that then?
Well, I was a minister in that church, and then from there, I got involved in Spanish ministry. Preaching in different churches. I moved down to Miami, Florida, to work with my parents' church. Did that for a couple of years. Then I moved away again. Was more of an evangelist. Got fully involved in Spanish ministry at the national level. Just moved around here and there, but always doing something more for the Lord. moved to my first pastorate was in Missouri, and it was an English church that had a Spanish outreach. So I kind of did both for a few years, and then moved down to Miami for 1 year. It's a lot of moving around, and then moved to Tampa, and that's where I've stayed for the last 20-some years. And I started a church in Tampa, and Tampa para Cristo. So that's what we are.
And you said that you started out with English and then transitioned kind of to the Spanish ministry. Right. Do you know what would you say is like a difference that you noticed kind of between the two?
Yeah. I think the biggest difference that I noticed and still do is the worship. And I very much enjoyed the Spanish worship and the way that people worship God and the freedom to worship God. That is a major difference. And over the years, I've seen the Spanish ministry move, I think, in some areas that are more consistent with the Bible and with what God is wanting to do in this time. So I think in Spanish ministry we're poised, and we have been having revival, but we're poised for even greater revival because of the way that I have seen the Spanish churches move, that I haven't seen the same in the English churches. So that's kind of exciting to be at the forefront of what God is doing.
Yeah. And do you know why exactly that is? Maybe like why there's a difference in worship?
The difference in the worship, I think some of it is cultural. Some of it is the fact that, as you know, we Hispanics tend to be more emotional and more expressive, more spontaneous. And so when we come to the worship, we respond to God's Spirit that way. And in the English church, people are more reserved, more, calmer, I guess.
It's a little different, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think some of it is the culture, and then also the teaching. I mean, I think all Spanish pastors that I know of teach about, worshiping God 100% and dancing and celebrating, and it's just part of what we preach and teach. And there is not that same emphasis in the American churches. They don't go into worship that much. So I think a lot of it is yes, the culture, but also the insight that Spanish pastors have into that part of our Christian life. So,
yeah. So then going back to just Tampa para Cristo.
Yeah.
Was this something, a work that you kind of started from scratch, or did you kind of start with like the English church somewhere there and then build it from there? Or?
Yeah, we were in an English church, and the pastor gave me different responsibilities. I think he gave me deaf ministry and singles ministry and Spanish ministry and something else. And somehow I just ended up in Spanish ministry. And so we started a daughter church at that church, and then we moved the location to another area of town where there were Spanish people. So that's how that began.
And what's that experience like, just kind of building a church?
A church. Well, it takes a lot of faith. It takes a lot of faith. It's a lot of work. I followed a certain process that I have been studying, where we went out and we met people in the community and started getting to know the community. Started meeting with people in their homes, and then had an opening day that was April 6th. April 6th, I think, 2006. Yeah. And so we invited people to come and just kind of work with the community to get that started. So we had a good number that showed at that first service and continued to come. So that was good.
Something you touched on that I actually wanted to ask you was that this meeting at homes.
Yeah.
Right. This concept of meeting at the homes of individuals, of church members.
Yeah.
Where did that kind of idea come from?
Well, I came from the background of seeing my parents do it, always visiting people in their homes, the background of teaching home Bible studies. And so that seemed like just a natural. It was not a cell group thing. It was just meeting with people in their homes, going through a Bible study, inviting them to church, getting to know their relatives and neighbors and all that. So yeah, that was part of my DNA, I guess, growing up in ministry. That you always, visited people in their homes.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I know we preach here is just making that connection, right? Yeah. Building that connection with someone else. Yeah. It helps open the door to just talk about Jesus.
Yeah.
Right, to testify and talk about the church and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So it's always, we always maybe try to overcomplicate how to, I don't want to say like win a soul, but just how to connect them to God.
Right.
It's just simply just talking to them.
Yeah.
Right. And those doors open up.
Yeah. And that's, of course, from where we are now, it's very much, we clearly see it's very much what Jesus did, what the apostles did, just meeting in the homes. So yeah, that's how we started, and we still do it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So then, talk to me a little bit about Tampa para Cristo. What's happened in like the last few years then?
The last few years, we've kind of revamped our vision, and I think the Lord has helped us to see that more clearly, and to put a process in place that's very biblical. Nothing. It's not a program. It's just a way of following the Bible. And I'm going to talk about that on Saturday, I believe, with the pastors. But it comes down to 3 elements. We call it ciudades para Cristo. We call the vision cities for Christ. So the vision is God is not interested in individual big churches. He's interested in winning the city. So how are we going to win the city? Well, anything that we do that will help us to win the city, then that's what we need to do. Anything that would hold us back from that, then that's not what we should do. So one of the biggest issues was we've outgrown our building. We have 2 services. We're almost outgrowing one of the services. And so, do we get a new building, go in a building program? And I felt and I prayed, and God confirmed that would really hold us back from God's vision for Tampa para Cristo. Because God's vision is Tampa para Cristo. So not just one church, but many churches. So the vision is to expand the work, to plant many, we call them micro iglesias, micro churches, all over Tampa, and to not buy a new building, because that would tie us down financially. That would change the focus of the church from focusing on souls to focusing on paying for this building. Okay, all those things. And so our vision has been to train people that will be able to go and plant micro churches. We have in Florida, you can do this, a very unique thing, but we have 2 tents. We have one that we're using. So you buy a tent, 20 by 40, chairs, a very portable sound system. And so we have been meeting in a parking lot in a Spanish store. And just once a month, but now we're going to look for a permanent place to meet. So that would be a church there. That would be a congregation where you'll be able to have, 30 to 75 people that can meet there on a regular basis. And I know in Chicago that would be hard because of the weather, but, that's kind of the vision that God has given us, to plant many churches all throughout Tampa so that we can impact the city of Tampa.
Yeah.
Because that's what God is interested in. So that is our vision. Now, that's what we do externally. What we do internally is we're focused on discipleship, how to making disciples, and what we call a cell group, in Spanish, Casas para Cristo, discípulos de Jesús. So those are the two components to the cell group and the discipleship.
And I was about to ask, like, how did you, or what process do you take in training people for this vision?
Yeah, right. Yeah. We used to have a Bible Institute. We have stopped it because we're taking people through discipleship. But then at the end, we give 1 year of some of the classes in the Institute that they're not getting in the discipleship. So that's how we're doing that. But basically, if you're a cell group leader and you can grow that cell group to 20, 30, I mean, that's a church, really. That's a congregation. And so the people that we're sending are people that have been successful in growing a cell group. And so that's a wonderful next step to, a bigger congregation. Because if you cannot grow a cell group from 10 to 20 to 30, then there's no point in sending you out to start a church because, you don't know how to do it. So
yeah. So then I'm guessing that you've seen once you started doing this vision that you've seen good results, right?
So far, yeah. We've only done 2, so we're very early. We were going to do this, and then COVID came, and it kind of threw us back. But that's the vision that we have. And Lord willing, we will do it. It's been done in other places. And I believe that is a way that you can reach people in the neighborhoods. People in a city like Chicago or Tampa, they're not going to go much beyond talking about new people, 20, 25, 30 minutes. Anything beyond that, they're not going to come to church, the new people. It's too far. Okay. And so any area that is 30 minutes from the main church, then we want to put a congregation there. That's the goal that we have.
Yeah. And just, we're almost running out of time here, but I just wanted, something I noted is just that throughout all of this, like your whole testimony and the work you put in is just this serving, right? It's just willing to do whatever is possible, right? Yeah. Doing whatever you can. So what advice would you have someone who wants to either start out, there's barely starting their ministry, or they want to start serving in this kingdom? Like, what kind of advice would you have for people like that?
I have a verse here that is from 2 Timothy 2:24. It says, "The servant of the Lord must not strive, but be gentle unto all men, apt to teach, patient, in meekness instructing those that oppose themselves, if God peradventure will give them repentance to the acknowledging of the truth." And so the first thing is the word servant, which in the King James translation, and in fact in all the translations, even in the Spanish translation, has been whitewashed. It's been made a nice word. But the actual word is doulos, which means slave. So anytime you see servant in the Bible, or siervo, means slave. And they had slaves back then. We know that. A slave belonged to the master. A slave did not have a life except the life that, he was there to serve the master. Anytime, any place, he served the food for the family, and then he got the leftovers in the corner, afterwards in the kitchen. And, in the translations, they made it servant, siervo. That sounds pretty, but the actual word is doulos, which means slave. And so the slave of the Lord. Wow. So the focus of a slave was in serving. He didn't have a choice about it. He was expected to sacrifice. He was expected to give it all and not even get thanks for it. It's, hey, you're a slave. That's what you do. And so I think if we want to serve God, if we're starting out in ministry, which also means serving, then we need to have that perspective that I'm here to serve. And I'm going to serve in all kinds of ways that I never thought I would serve. And as long as there is a need, then I am there to serve. And it changes as you grow in ministry. As right now, a big area of my serving is training other people so that they can preach and teach, and but if there's a work to be done in the church, construction, whatever, I mean, I've done it. I'm willing to do it. I know how to do it. But that's the perspective that I think we ought to have. Our job is not preaching. That's part of it, or teaching, or singing, or playing music. Our job is service. That's it. We're slaves. That doesn't sound pretty, but we're slaves of God, and it's actually a nice thing. If you were the slave of an important person in Rome, for example, I mean, you had status. I mean, nobody could mess with you. Your life was okay. He's a slave of that particular person. You better treat him right. So there's a lot on that, and I've preached on that in my church. But we're servants. We're slaves of God. We're called to serve, and so we need to have the mentality of service. And in my church, I do not put any young person to preach or in any kind of leadership position unless I see that they're willing to serve. That if there's a calling, hey, we need a few people to stay after church and help us clean. If that young person doesn't stay to clean, I'm noticing. And I'm like, he needs to learn how to serve. Because he may be a musician, he may be a group leader, he may be a Sunday school teacher. But if when the call to serve comes, he or she does not respond, they're still missing something because that call is for them.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's important.
Yeah.
Amen. Anything else? I may be missing anything else I may have forgotten to ask, or?
No, I mean, that's been my goal in anything that I've done, whether it was in Spanish ministry at the national level or in the local church. Wherever I find that there is a need and nobody else is doing it, then that's where I jump in. In the last year, I've gotten involved in politics, I guess. Not really, but representing Hispanics to the legislators. And some things are happening that are affecting Hispanics in a negative way in Florida. So I've gone up to Tallahassee, to where all the headquarters of the government is, and met with representatives and met with senators and had meetings and things like that. Why did I do it? Because nobody else is doing it. And so, again, that perspective of there is a need, it's not being met, nobody's doing it, so I'm going to jump in and do it, even though I've never done it before, even though I may not like it, I don't like it. But if there is a need that needs to be met for God's people, then my job is to meet that need. So that's the perspective of ministry that I've always had. And it's not fighting for position and, whatever. No, on the contrary, it's finding what nobody's doing and maybe nobody wants to do and taking care of that. And then God will bless that and move you where he wants you to be.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Pastor, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for watching another edition of the El Calvario podcast. As always, like, subscribe, follow, share. Just get this to as many people as possible. And again, one more time, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
It's funny because you mentioned that growing up you didn't want to be a pastor. You saw all the sacrifice, you saw all that stuff, and here you are anyway, right?
I didn't see the blessing of it. So.
Yeah. So again, thank you for joining us. And for everyone else, till next time, have a great day.
Blessings.